So this next chapter, chapter 4, is actually a very brief overview of A-Frame's website, of the official website for A-Frame. And I will just go very quickly through some of the main parts of the site, not all, but some of the main parts. So if you go to that website, if you just write in your browser's address bar aframe.io, I'll write it here, without the dash. Okay, so the name of the framework is a-frame, but the domain name is just aframe, no dash, aframe.io. So if you go to that website, that's the official website. So it's kind of the source of truth for the documentation for the platform, for the framework that we are using. And you'll see right in the front page a left area with a few examples. So you can just, I suggest that you go through some of these just to see what's possible to do with A-Frame. But then the main part, the most important part for us is actually located behind this docs link. So there's on the right side in the top, there's kind of a menu, and the first entry is called docs. It actually takes you to the documentation of the things that we are currently using. So if you go there, you will see a web page similar to this one that's on the picture there. And I'll open it and I'll just show you some of the examples there. So I'll open the documentation, and you see it has a few other parts. The most important parts for us, of course, you should afterwards explore this site a bit more. I'll just point you to the most important ones, the most important parts. The most important part is actually here in the left. So there's a scroll area here. And if you scroll down to the very bottom, you'll see a section called primitives. And this has the documentation, so the explanation of the attributes and the function of the various primitives that we will use. So for example, I'll just find here the first one for the box. If you click there, then here in the middle section, it usually has this structure. So a brief description of the primitive, then an example, and then details about the attributes that that primitive supports. And here you see that there are lots of attributes for the box. Don't worry too much about the number of attributes, because we will go through the most important ones and for the most important primitives also. You'll also see, if you scroll up a bit in this left area, you'll actually see that there's documentation for components. We'll talk a bit more about components later on, but so these are all also important things to see. And sometimes you'll see that there's a primitive documented here, but there's actually also a component with the same name. So sometimes we need to check both to really understand how that thing works. So sometimes we need to read the documentation for the primitive, which describes that element. But then the documentation for the component itself, which gives us typically a bit more detail about that component. You can also see here at almost at the top that A-Frame has actually kind of a set of tutorials for using A-Frame. So this is kind of an alternative to the course that we are currently going through, to my course. But some of the topics here are a bit more advanced. So if you are really curious and you want really to explore a bit more A-Frame, you should check this section. If not, then it's probably easier to stick with just my course, because I think it's a bit more complete, and it goes through the basics in a step-by-step fashion, so it's easier to follow, I think. But so this is the main documentation website for A-Frame. And so some of the things you will sometimes need to really come to this site and search for documentation about a particular attribute, for example, or a particular configuration for a component. There's also, this is just for reference. You can also find this in the website, in A-Frame's website. But I've left here a link. I'll just open it now. A link for external components for A-Frame. Again, we'll see some of these later on. We'll see them one by one. But I just wanted to let you know up front that A-Frame, so there's a core of A-Frame which provides us with the core functionality. And for now, we just have been using that. So it gives us the primitives, like a box, for example. But then there are components which other people have written. I have written, for example, a few components that extend the functionality of A-Frame. And these are kind of external components. So they are not part of the official A-Frame distribution, but we can use them to extend the functionality of A-Frame. And in this website, you can find lots and lots of external components that add functionality to A-Frame. So I just wanted to let you know that there is this feature in A-Frame, so it can be extended. And again, if you are curious and you really want to explore A-Frame, you should check out some of these components and see what they do and how they allow you to extend A-Frame.